This is going to be different, really, than any sermon I've ever preached before, because we're going to do a little dramatic reenactment at the end. I've asked my wife to help me. But this is a sermon about the millennium. And there are a couple of reasons to understand what may be coming in the millennium. First of all, you probably want to know because you hopefully will be there. And you might want to understand a little bit what might be coming. And so I'm not guaranteeing all the things I say are going to happen. I'm only doing what I feel like God showed me, and I prayed about this, and He kept adding things about what might be happening then. But again, when I do the dramatic skit, this isn't Scripture. This is just my understanding of what might be happening to give everyone who listens to this an understanding of what might be happening. Now, before we start that, I want to tell you a little story. And it's a story about a man who had a family, and his wife and his couple of children were gone, and he was there alone on a very cold, wintry night. So he's there, he has a fire burning, he has a picture window there, and he's thinking about what his wife has said to him. She's left a Bible right next to the chair for him, and she said, "You need to ask Jesus into your heart. He's the only way to God." And this man's thinking, I don't buy this the only way. There has to be another way. There has to be more than one way, and that's one of the obstacles he's got in his life. He can't seem to come to God. So the Bible's there, he's thinking about reading it, he hasn't really read it. And while he's considering this and thinking about how right he is, a bird tries to get into the house, and it's so cold out there and there's so much snow coming down that the bird wants to get in, and the bird hits the window but can't get in. So he looks at the bird, and what is this window? He's trying to get in the house. So the bird again throws itself against the window, falls down, and he goes over to the door and opens. He says, Listen, I want you to come in. I want to save you in this terrible storm, but you can't come in through the window. You got to come in through the door. But the bird doesn't understand, and when he walks out and talks through the door, the bird gets afraid and kind of moves away. And then the bird tries to come in through the window again and hits the glass. And soon the bird is bloody and just loses all its energy, and it kind of falls down, barely able to move. He goes over the door again. He says, "Come in. This is the way in. There's only one way in the house." So finally the bird gets enough energy, and it flies in, and it comes in the house, and he kind of puts it down next to the fire. And he's thinking about this bird and how he doesn't understand how to get in. And after the bird's there a while, he opens the Bible. And he opens the Bible to John 10:7. And it says, "Then Jesus said to them again, 'Most assuredly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go out and find pasture.'" And from that object lesson, that man finally saw that Jesus is the door. Just as that bird couldn't figure out how to get in the house, Jesus was showing him, this is how you come to salvation. So with that, let's go ahead and go to the scriptures regarding the millennium. That little story was for somebody listening, either today or on the internet. The last bowl of judgment is thrown to the earth in the book of Revelation. If you read chapter 20, you'll see what it talks about regarding the millennium. I'm not going to read all the scriptures. I'm going to read quite a few. Jesus comes back to end it all, and He renews the earth, and He makes it somewhat new again. It's not now, after the millennium, there's going to be a whole new heaven and earth created. This isn't that, but He's going to clean the earth up. Can you imagine after the apocalypse and most likely nuclear weapons and everything else going on that the earth's going to be pretty bad shape? It's in pretty bad shape right now as far as being contaminated, but think about at that point it's really going to be bad. So Jesus comes and He fixes everything. Now in Revelation 1:7, it refers to Him coming. It says, "Behold, I am coming with clouds, and every eye shall see Him, even they who pierced Him, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn because of Him. Even so, amen." Look, I know most of you know this, but I need to mention this too, and that is that Jesus very specifically says, in the end there will be people who say, come to our group, he's here, this is the way, oh, He's hiding in there. He's saying, don't believe any of that. That's not going to happen. That's all lies. When I come, every eye will see me. How's He going to do that? He can do it any way He wants to. Now we got TV, so we can do it that way, but He's going to do it any way He wants to. So that's how He comes back. So remember that. And when He returns, it says, that the tribes of the earth will mourn. Why will they mourn? They'll mourn because they know it's all true. And those on the earth finally figured out Jesus is God. They finally figured out He's the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father except by Him. But it's too late. It's too late, so they mourn. And then it also says about that millennium period that Satan will be bound in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. Revelation 26 says, "Blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. Over such the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years." So it's talking about Jesus literally ruling on earth from the city of Jerusalem. The world is peaceful, there are no more wars. Now let me mention something about priests. We'll get into this a little bit later, but obviously we're not under the old covenant. We don't have the priests that had those duties of sacrificing. But the word priest here means, both in Greek and Hebrew, it means someone who mediates between humans and God. So essentially, right now, all of you are priests to that extent. You are the intermediary that God uses when you talk to somebody about Jesus. And during the millennium, there'll be more of that. We'll explain why. So let me just go over a few things here, because not everybody, a lot of you know this very well and some of you don't, but I'll tell you how it's prophesied in many places in the Bible. I'm not going to use all of them, that he will rule on earth. In Zechariah 8:3, it says, "Thus says the Lord, I will return to Zion, and I will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain." Then in Ezekiel 37:26 we read, "Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it shall be an everlasting covenant with them. I will establish them and multiply them, and I will set my sanctuary in the midst of them." Ezekiel 37:27, "My tabernacle also shall be with them. Indeed, I will be their God, and they shall be my people." He's going to be with us. Ezekiel 37:28, "The nations also will know that I, the Lord, sanctify Israel when my sanctuary is in the midst of them forevermore." So, those who are faithful to him will rule with him, beginning with the 12 apostles who will be next to him. In fact, Jesus talks about this in Matthew 19:28. He says, "Assuredly I say to you that in the regeneration," let me tell you about that word before I finish the scripture. The regeneration is Palingenesia. What that is it means redoing things, renewing things. In the Hebrew, it specifically means rebirth, like the rebirth of a state. It means renovation, restoration. That's that regeneration. That's what it means, and that's what Jesus is referring to the millennium here. He's saying in the regeneration. We know it wasn't before that. It's during the millennium. "When the Son of Man sits on his throne of glory, you who have followed me will also sit on the 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." So there it is, Jesus talking about it. Revelation 5:10, "And have made us kings and priests to our God, and we shall reign on the earth." So again, we'll be here on the earth for that 1,000 years. Let me explain to you what it is a little bit. It's a semi-utopia. It's not perfect, and one of the reasons it's not perfect is because there will be people who are not saved and are not in a glorified body. We get the glorified body, right, in heaven, and we come back with that. But there'll be people who aren't saved there. We know that from what we read, but let me explain to you what I believe will happen and why that's the case. When Jesus comes back, you know there's going to be Armageddon. There'll be a lot of children, babies, who are not yet to the age of accountability, and they will still be on the earth. And those people are going to grow up and have children during that 1,000-year period. Now, let me explain this, although most of you know it. If you look at what Paul said, the Apostle Paul said, "I was once alive without the law." What's he talking about? He's talking about when he was too young, and then he said, then sin came. Sin doesn't come till you're accountable, till you can understand it. So he's talking about the fact that an infant, a baby, and I don't know the age of accountability, it may be different for different people, but at some point you become responsible. King David talked about the same thing. He was talking about the baby that he had with Bathsheba, who died. He said, "He won't come to me, but I will go to him." So he knew that baby was in heaven, and that's what it's talking about, and that's what makes many people believe that there will be people born at that time and they will populate the earth. So the utopia that we would have had is kind of messed up for them. Why? You see, even without Satan, he's bound for 1,000 years. Even without him tempting people. People have their own, we're born in sin. We have our own bad tendencies. So people can be pretty bad without Satan, as a matter of fact, as we will find out as we read more, look at more of this. And something else about you in the millennium. The gifts that you have that you may not have been able to use here, I believe you'll be able to use there in your glorified body. And you will be talking to people who are not saved. And they can say you can't understand, but you're going to tell them, look, I was like you, and even in worse conditions than you, I had Satan tempting me. So you could identify with them. Somewhat the way Jesus came and became a man, so he could say to man, look, I've been tempted on all points like you have, and I didn't give it. In other words, to be able to identify with someone, you have to be there. It's kind of like you get some man comes back from Afghanistan, he's been in the war, and someone says, oh, I know what you're going through. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't know unless you've been there, And so these are the things that but a veteran comes to him and says, hey, man, I've been through this. I know what you're going through. And he can minister to him. And that's the way it's going to be for us. We'll be able to do that, but we'll also know a lot of what happened here. I'll tell you about how our memories will be taken away later, but for that time, you'll have your memory, and you will know who the relatives are that you have there that may have come from some of the line of your family. You can minister to them. So Revelation 2:26 says, and he who overcomes and keeps my works until the end, I will give him power over the nation. So that's the ruling part. You're going to be in a position of authority. Revelation 3:21, to him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down on my Father and his throne. That's a pretty tremendous promise. Really? Looking forward to that. I'll just be happy to be there. As far as being near his throne, that would be awesome. But isn't that a wonderful promise? The other thing we know about that time is that there'll be no more wild animals, they'll all be tame. Lions and tigers will be tame and friendly. Isaiah 11:6 says, the wolf shall also dwell with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. Kids can play with those animals. The cow and the bear shall graze. So there'll be no more, it won't be carnivorous anymore. They'll be eating grass. The young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the viper's den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters covers the sea. So the false religions will be banished. And people will seek Jesus in Jerusalem. Zechariah 8:21, the inhabitants of one city will go to another, saying, let us continue to go and pray before the Lord and seek the Lord of hosts. I myself will go also. Zechariah 8:22, yes, many peoples and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem and to pray before the Lord. Micaiah 4:2, Micah 4:2, many nations shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion the law shall go forth, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And we know Satan's bound for 1,000 years, and apparently people will live a long time like they did back in Genesis. Why will they live so long? They're going to have to be tested just like we were. When Satan's loosed, why is he loosed in 1,000 years? He's loosed so he can tempt them, because they have to be tempted in the way we were. So, it says something about how he's going to rule, which is very important and something a lot of people don't realize. Revelation 2:27 says, he shall rule them with a rod of iron. A rod of iron. In Hebrew, it's harados. It means a cudgel, which you hit people with. It also means a baton of royalty, a scepter, a staff. So it's got that authority of royalty, but it also has the power of physical harm to those who don't obey. A rod of iron. So I know we're so far from this now in our society where everything's so easy and you can do anything you want. This is hard to understand, but that's what's going to happen. See, in Ecclesiastes 8:11, This is the way it is in our world. It says, Ecclesiastes 8:11 says, because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the hearts of the sons of men are fully set to do evil. See, because it doesn't happen right away. If a lightning bolt came down every time you did something wrong, you'd probably stop doing it. But see, you're being tested, so it doesn't work that way in this society. But when Jesus rules with a rod of iron, it means punishment will be swift. And what will he do? Well, we know a little bit about what we'll do. Zechariah 14:7, and it shall be that whichever the families of the earth do not come up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, on them there will be no rain. And then, if the family of Egypt will not come up and enter in, they shall have no rain. Listen, they shall receive the plague with which the Lord strikes the nations who do not come up to the Feast of Tabernacles. A plague coming on you because you don't obey. I want to mention one thing to you. I've got a doctor who's a Christian, my primary care physician, and he was talking about, I can't wait to go to heaven. I don't want to do this anymore. I said, no, wait a minute now. I think they're going to have doctors in the millennium. I think you're going to have to do a little work. So, to hold on yet. You're not finished yet. Because if there's a plague and there are other problems like that, well, there's going to need to be we need doctors, right? Now, understand that this rebellion, it's hard sometimes for people to understand it, but look, there was rebellion with Satan in heaven, right? Before, and there was no tempter there. They just rebelled. And Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, who can know it? So, understand that the concept of people sinning without Satan is not, the Garden of Eden, they did it, Satan was there as a serpent, but that's when it all started. But if you go back again in heaven, you'll see, wait, they sinned without a tempter. So I've asked my wife to come up here, and we're going to do something different. I've never done this before preaching. We're going to do a little skit, and we haven't memorized all this. It's not going to be, wonderful. But I'm going to do a little skit about how I think it might happen in the millennium. And you might want to unclip that so you can move it. Yeah. It took a bit to talk her into this, by the way. But So we're looking at a time in the millennium, and they send this woman, who also happens to be named Carol, to this group of protesters. They're in a park and they're protesting and they're rebelling against God. And so she is sent to talk to them, and also because she has a relative there. So this is kind of how it may go. And as I prayed and did this, God kept giving me new things. And again, this is not guaranteed, but this is an idea of how it may go. She's going to be in a glorified body. She comes to speak to them. And she comes up and she's standing there, and the first thing they say to her is, who are you and what are you here for?
To try to reason with you, to help you. My name is Carol.
Can you guys hear this okay? It sounds... Okay, go ahead. Yeah, sure. The ruling class is here to help us. You even say you were like us, but I don't believe it.
But it's true. We were like you. After we died, we got our glorified bodies. In fact, Micaiah is actually related to me. He came from my brother's family.
Micaiah, Mick, come here.
Mick, you look different. What's wrong?
Nothing. When I was a child, I thought like a child. Remember that one? Well, after the first 150 years of this brainwashing, I met some new people. And then I saw it for what it was. I was programmed, and I got deprogrammed, and now I'm free.
Mick, don't join that group. When they march against Jesus, they'll die. The Bible is clear as what's going to happen.
Yeah, they made us read that stupid book in school, and we don't believe any of it. None of it makes sense. Are we really supposed to believe that the world was different before we were born? It's all said to deceive us so we won't rebel. You're trying to scare us. And I don't believe we're related. Maybe you came from another planet. You're aliens and not human. They lie and say you're a human, but I think they just say that to make us feel bad about not obeying Jesus. Because everything we do is wrong and everything you do is right. It's not fair. Isn't that right, Matthew? Yeah, Mick. They made it all up. They tell us the water was polluted, the air was dirty, there was all kinds of crime, the animals were dangerous. Can you imagine my lion biting someone? Ridiculous. No way. And of course, the people were starving, wars were being fought. We don't believe any of it. It's all lies. They've told us to keep us in line. And what about freedom of religion? I'm not free at all. As soon as I do something that dictator Jesus doesn't like, I get punished. And if I don't go to Jerusalem to worship, I get punished.
You are free. You don't have to.
Yeah, and then we don't get rain or we get punished some other way. You leaders aren't fair. James just used some opium poppy and he's arrested. Why? Since it grows and you say Jesus created it, then why aren't you responsible? Why not kill the plant? Remember, they said he killed that fig tree. And no one gets a fair trial. You guys run the courts. You are the judges. You only allow us to have the lawyers like us. You're not fair. That's another reason why Mick won't leave our group, and you say God is merciful.
He is.
Sorry, but I can't believe that. Remember, we all read the book. We had to in school. We see how your God killed everyone in some of these places. Children, animals, everything that breathes. We don't want to be part of a God like that.
You don't understand. Those children went to heaven. But sin was so great. The children were the result of incest and
There's nothing wrong with incest.
inbreeding over generations caused mutations.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Well, there was also sexual sin, incurable diseases, drugs that ruined their minds. Everything had to be eliminated. Sin had already destroyed those people.
So God said, murder them all?
You don't understand because you've never seen how low man can get. You haven't seen the world I've lived in.
Enough.
Matthew, I'm not finished. I was talking to Mick.
Yes, you are. We have our own God, a goddess who is freeing us. She's preaching real love and concern for us. And she says these rules we have to live under are evil.
Yes, we know who she is. Soon she'll be on the sickbed if she continues in her lies.
See, that's what I mean. Any leader who you love, we love, you ruin. Oh, we know you have the power to make her sick. And that's what saddens us. Anyone we want to rule that does not fall in line with your Jesus will be taken from us. That's why we protest. I'm surprised he hasn't made us all sick.
But God is patient. He's long-suffering, and that's why you haven't been punished for your rebellion. He's hoping you'll change.
Yeah, well, I heard about what it used to be like. It's even in the book. I think he treated Satan unfairly. He just got tired of forced worship like we have. He was kicked out of heaven just because he wanted to be free. He's supposed to be released after 1,000 years, and we're close to that, and I can't wait to join him.
Mick, do you feel that way too? Do you agree with Matthew on this?
I do. Let Satan out now. You say Jesus is merciful and loving. You say love your enemies. You are a hypocrite. He served over 900 years. Release him now. Show mercy for him, and maybe we will believe you.
You don't understand God's mercy because you've never asked Jesus into your heart.
Yeah, sure. I thought you would say that. You're not open-minded. See, you think only Jesus is God, but I don't agree. I think there's a better God that wouldn't be so hard on us, won't make us do all these things his way. He will liberate us so we can have sex whenever we want and anything we want to do.
So you want to burn up and go to hell forever?
I don't believe I will. I'm a good person, and it's all lies. I want my freedom. Mick, stop talking to her. Look, lady, quit coming here and preaching to us. You're part of the whole ruling class, and we don't like you. You think you're better than us, and we don't like you being around, so get out of here. Wait a minute, Matthew. Carol, my name is Joseph. We don't all feel that way. A few of us want to talk to you about Jesus, so please meet us on the other side of the park. That's the end of our little skit. So we're going to talk a minute about the defeat of Satan, Revelation 27. And when the 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for battle. We're talking about Armageddon, right? Whose number is as the sand of the sea. Not Armageddon, excuse me. Armageddon was before. I'm saying this is a new thing. They're all gathering against him. They went up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints in the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. So this time there's nothing else, just burns them all up. But we're talking about people like the sand of the sea. Once Satan's, it says the path is narrow and few find it. Once Satan's released, it's even worse. See, that rebellion's already starting before he gets released. We know that because there's punishment for things they're doing that they should be doing with Jesus. So they were not worshiping him. They're not going up to Jerusalem. So when the enemy is released, that's what happens. Now, eventually, there'll be a new heaven and a new earth at that 1,000-year period. But in Isaiah 65:17 says something about what's going to happen to us. For behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered or come to mind. Why? Do you think any of us could have perfect peace knowing that some of our friends and relatives are not in heaven? God's going to have to wipe that memory so we can have that peace. If you can't remember it, it's gone from your mind, it won't be an issue. It's sad, but that's going to be the case. So because it's so sad, we won't be able to have that peace without it. Now, the other thing about this is, if you look at, you say, well, Jesus will be there, will be running the earth perfectly, they'll know he's God. Yeah, but you know what? Look at Luke 16. The rich man said, hey, send Lazarus. And Jesus said, because he's raising from the dead, then they'll believe. He said, look, if they don't believe Moses and the prophets, neither will they believe if one's raised from the dead. See, we underestimate the blindness. We underestimate the fact that Jesus could be there right away, just like he was with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, working miracles, and they say, no, you're not God. And that's what's going to be like in the millennium. It doesn't matter what Jesus does. It doesn't matter what happens. We're almost finished here, but let me talk to you a little bit about self-destructing. Remember, I preached a sermon about apostasy not so long ago. And I said it wasn't just turning from religion, it's turning away from the truth. Like, you're saying that you're a woman when you're a man. There's a 180 from the truth. Apostasy is turning away from everything you know is true. And it also always brings self-destruction. So right now, what are we doing in this country? Everything's changing, and it's changing quickly. And we are on that same road of self-destruction that all nations are on when they turn away from the truth. That's why we're letting our borders open, letting people in, Chinese nationals coming in, everybody coming in, getting in their sleeper cells, ready to do something. That's why we've got all these, if you don't watch Fox News and you just watch mainstream media, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. That's why we've got 200 food processing plants that have been destroyed and burned down. That's why we've got electric generating plants. You think this is a coincidence? More than ever before being destroyed? Is this a dress rehearsal? I'm not trying to say this to upset you, but Christians, you got to wake up. You got to see what's really coming. And you've got to prepare, not only, maybe you'll store food, but prepare yourself spiritually for this. Because I'll tell you what, the people in China and Russia and many of these Arab countries who are Christians, they've been going through this stuff for a long, long time. We're going to be going through it. That apostasy has happened when the country's going to self-destruct because of sin, unless it repents. We need to be praying for the repentance. We need to be praying for God to move on people's hearts to see. Because when you see people saying things that are obviously not true, that's the apostasy. That's like they're turning from the truth and say a man can get pregnant. It's something that's just almost crazy. It's nonsense. How do you get to where you believe that? You have to have let Satan get in your mind, because no one would say something like that or think that way. No one would be worried about pronouns with China building up their weapons, and we're worried about the military using the right pronouns unless they're completely deceived. I didn't mean to get political, but you know what? Way back in our country, the pastors back then, and I am a previous pastor, they were the ones who were the best informed. They were telling people what was going on so they'd know how to pray. It may be depressing, but you need to know how to pray, and you can't know how to pray if you don't know what's happening. And you've got to understand that the mainstream media is trying to hide this from you. But God will give you discernment, and God will show you what to pray for, like that pastor in Canada, because that's what we're here for. We're supposed to pray for those people. So I thank you for coming, and I'm going to ask the praise team to come back. Before you go, there is some good news. A lot of you have children who have fallen away. You know, you send a child to college these days, and, well, I think many of you know what I'm talking about. But the things that are coming on in this country right now, a lot of those things are going to wake those kids up, those young people up, and other people who aren't saved. They're going to start seeing what's happening, and that's going to push them towards Jesus. And that's part of the hope, is that revival will start through that, and things will change. Because there's always hope with God. Things can always change if people change their minds to serve Him. And so the fact is that Romans 8:28 applies to every situation we're in, and it's going to apply to this one, because we're going to see a revival, and we're going to see many people who we thought would never come to God, and I'm praying for a lot of them I see on the news and such, come to God, and we're also going to see some of those kids, relatives, and friends that you didn't think would come waking up. And pray they would. You know, you can't pray they'd be saved and make them get saved, but you can pray they'll see the truth. And crawl out to God. Show them the truth, God. And so you have a blessed week, and remember to pray for those